Excellent. All right, so we're on Sunday, October 5th, 1884. Yeah. And last week we finished singing, five or six songs with the master and just enjoyed that poetry and that feeling. These songs that he chooses are always so beautiful, so deep. They're scripture in and of themselves, it seems to me. It's always a good, a satisfying thing to sit down and read them and just meditate on them for a while. All right, so Sunday, October 5th, 1884. Sri Ramakrishna is sitting in his room after the midday meal with M and Hazra, the elder Kali, Baburam, Ramlal, Hari, and others. Some of them sat on the floor and some of them stood about. On the previous day, the master had visited Keshav's mother at her Calcutta house and had made her happy with his devotional songs. Hazra had been living with the master at Dakshineshwar a long time. He was a little conceited about his knowledge and even criticized the master now and then before others. Again, he would sit on the veranda of the master's room and tell his beads with apparent concentration. He spoke slightingly of Chaitanya as a modern incarnation. He would say, God gives not only pure devotion, but also wealth. He has no lack of it. By attaining God, one obtains the eight occult powers as well. Hazra had a small debt to clear up, about 1,000 rupees. He had incurred it for the building of his house and was worried about paying it. The elder Kali had a position in an office from which he received a small salary. He had a large family to maintain. He was devoted to the master and visited him now and then, even absenting himself from the office. Kali to Hazra, you go about criticizing people. You're like a touchstone testing what is pure gold and what is impure. Why do you speak so much ill of others? Hazra, whatever I say to him, meaning Sri Ramakrishna alone. The master, that is so. Hazra began to explain Tattva Jnana. Hazra, the meaning of Tattva Jnana is the knowledge of the existence of the 24 tattvas, or cosmic principles. He was wrong about the meaning of the word. A devotee, what are they? Oh, Hazra, the five elements, the six passions, the five organs of perception, the five organs of action, and so forth. M to the master smiling. He says that the six passions are also included in the 24 cosmic principles. Master smiling. Listen to them. Notice how he explains Tattvajnana. The word really means knowledge of self. The word tat means the supreme self. The word tvam, the embodied soul. And one attains supreme knowledge, Tattvajnana, by realizing the identity of the embodied soul and the supreme self. After a few minutes, Hazra left the room and sat on the porch. Master to M and the others. He, meaning Hazra, only argues. This moment perhaps he understands, but the next moment he is in his old self again. Yeah, that's the real challenge of all of this, is this egoism, this identity with body mind and all of its abstractions and stories and pulls, that it's always just keeping us pushed into a box. It makes us irritable, it causes us to react, it causes us to feel threatened by people. It causes us to go on the defensive at times, and it's that whole thing that kind of triggers moods in the mind. Moods in the mind are usually because you've identified with a set of feelings, a set of thoughts, and are contrary to another set of thoughts simultaneously. And it just gives you that irritable, I don't want to do anything, leave me alone state of mind. And it's also what makes us criticize others. The ego identity, as the master says, the ego is like an onion. If you keep peeling it, you come to realize there's absolutely nothing there. And that fact alone is the reason that the ego is always based in insecurity. As we've talked about, the ego is this attempt of ours to create a floaty, as it were, in Maya so that we can sit there comfortably. So, because Maya is always changing and nothing is the same ever, it's just a constant flow of unrepeating change. There's no way to find stability in the world. There's no way to find stability outside of yourself. How can you, in a world where everything changes? And that's why we have to work so hard. We go fill our desires, they get processed, and then we need the next round because the first round has disappeared. And so it's ongoing. And so in this world, that raft of safety that we've created is the ego, the little boundary that we've put about around ourselves. And we've set it out just far enough that we can believe that we're in charge on this side of that boundary. And whatever else the rest is in charge on the other side of that boundary. But inside our little fence, we'll constantly create a narrative and recreate a narrative to maintain our comfort zone, that we're not out of control, that we've got everything going the way we want it to go, and everything's going to be fine, right? And it's absolutely make believe, but it's about three or four assumptions deep. And so not often does something get all the way in to poke us, right? It's kind of stays on the other side of those of those presumptions, as it were. And so we see here Hazra is suffering from it. He's become critical of others. He's got a conceit about his knowledge, and he's sure enough about in that conceit. He's sure enough about what he knows that he goes in front of the master and the group and teaches something that's that's not true. Includes the six passions and the 24 cosmic principles. And but you see how kind the master is to him. The master is still very understanding and doesn't ridicule him openly at this point anyway. But he says, that this moment he perhaps understands, but the next moment he's right back to his old self again. And that is why we practice, right? We practice to try and counter those habits that keep bouncing back like rubber bands. We have bad habits and we try to say no to them, and we somehow find ourselves right back in the middle of them again. And we sit there for a while, and then we get up the gumption to kind of make another run for it, and we push them aside, and we try to be disciplined, and we go for a little while, and before long, we find ourselves slowly slipping back again to it. And that happens for two reasons. One, the two powers of Maya. Do you remember what the two powers of Maya are? Anybody? The power of forgetfulness and
Veiling and projecting.
yes, the power of forgetfulness and the power of projection. So the first thing is we forget our nature, and then we project a new one, a new set of ideas of what we are. And so that forgetting is constantly going on. Things grow weak in the mind, and then we get projections, new ideas, or ideas about what we want or what we think we are. And that's why our changing is so slow, because we're constantly forgetting and borrowing again into the unreal projection. And so that's why we need the slow changes, but very steady changes. I've got some hawk that's trying to move up into the rafters there, out there. All right. When anger hooks a big fish and finds it pulling hard, he releases the line. An angler, not an anger. Sorry. When the angler hooks a big fish and finds it pulling hard, he releases the line. Otherwise, it will snap and the angler himself will be thrown into the water. Therefore, I do not say much to him. So this is why he's kind of gentle with Hazra, because he knows you can't give somebody too much of a correction. You can't correct them beyond the level at which they think you love them. That's a very big thing of mine that I always use actually when I'm counseling or helping somebody who's asked for it. I always make sure, always checking myself, you can't correct somebody beyond the point that they think you love them. And so you always need to consider if you're about to scream at somebody, Have you ever screamed your love to them? If you haven't screamed your love to them, then you can't scream your anger at them, And so always keep yourself aware of being loving, of being true to your nature, letting that come out. And not just feeling because you're right that you have the right to say something, right? Mother says be very careful about speaking an unfriendly truth. Even if it's true, be careful about it. You don't want to hurt somebody for no reason. And if you're going to say something to them that's going to hurt them, then make sure that they know that that you love them at least that much. And then sit and meditate on your motives. Make sure that you're doing it out of love and not out of just an ego space of just being right or wanting to look better, perform better, all these ridiculous things that we get caught up in. To M, Hazra said that a man could not be liberated unless he was born in a Brahmin body. How is that? I said, one attains liberation through bhakti alone, through love, divine love alone. Savari was the daughter of a hunter. She, Ruhidas, and others belonged to the Shudra caste. They were liberated through bhakti alone. But still, Hazra insisted. He recognized Dhruva's spiritual greatness, but not as much as he recognized Prahlada's. When Latu said Dhruva had been yearning for God from his boyhood, he kept still. I said that there was nothing greater than the bhakti that sought no end and had no selfish motive. Hazra contradicted me. I said to him, a wealthy man is annoyed when a petitioner comes to him. There he comes, he says angrily. Sit down, he says to him in an indifferent voice, and shows that he is much annoyed. He doesn't allow such a beggar to ride with him in his carriage. But Hazra said that God was not like such wealthy people of the world. He did lack wealth, but should he feel pinched to give it away? Hazra said further, when rain falls from the sky, the Ganges and all the big rivers and the lakes overflow with water. Small tanks too are filled. Likewise, God, out of his grace, grants wealth and riches as well as knowledge and devotion. Okay. To the devotees. But I call this impure devotion to God. Right? It's not that wealth doesn't come from the Lord, but it's not necessarily a blessing to get it from the Lord. That's the thing. Wealth in and of itself is neutral. But if mother was to give you a whole bunch of money, she might be harming you. You might not be strong enough to control the way that you spend it. And it might destroy your devotion. It might take you deeper into the vices that you can't afford right now, right? There's any number of things. So wealth is not a guaranteed blessing, and asking for money is not guaranteed wisdom, right? And so we should be careful about that. And so he's saying, that yes, even though these things do come from God, they're not always a blessing, and it's impure to tie them to your devotion. It's impure to use your relationship with someone to get money from them, right? And how is that person ever going to trust you if they feel like you're there for their money? And so this is what they're talking about Hazra here and correcting him. I call that impure devotion to God. Pure devotion has no desire behind it. You don't want anything from me, but you love to see me and to hear my words. My mind also dwells on you. I wonder how you are and why you don't come. You don't want anything of God, but still you love him. That is pure bhakti, pure devotion. Love of God with no motive behind it. Prahlada had it. He sought neither kingdom nor riches. He sought God alone. M. Hazra is a chatterbox. He won't achieve anything unless he becomes silent. Master. Now and then he comes to me and becomes mellowed. But he is a pest. Again, he argues. It is very hard to get rid of egotism. You may cut down the ashwatha tree, but the next day a sprout will spring up. Just as long as the roots remain, the tree will grow again. right? And so what are these roots of egoism, right? It's one, not taking your sense of self-worth from the grace of God, from the love of the divine. It's from taking your sense of self from your doership, your assumed doing. It's based on memory, memory of both your successes and your failures, right? And so it's constantly looking for evidence of goodness in you. You're always gathering good news about yourself, good stories about yourself, good things that people say about you, right? But the ego is completely not dependable in that way either, because you can be feeling pretty good about yourself, and then somebody will say something, and it just gets under your skin the rest of the day. You walk around feeling insecure, right? I mean, I told that story about my two walks down Union Street in San Francisco, right? The one day I walked down the street and I was getting a lot of attention from people for some weird reason. And of course, the egoistic thought arose in my mind, well, my haircut must be good. I must, I must look handsome today, right? And that was my thought. And I was trying to deal with that because that wasn't a helpful thought, but there it was. And so the next day, though, when I woke up the next morning, I had just a little thing on my face here, and I messed with it. It became this horrible bleeding thing on my face, right? And so I tried to dab it with toilet paper and get it under control and stuff, but there it was. And then that afternoon, I was out walking again on Union Street, taking my afternoon walk, and with that same attention toward whether people were looking at me or not. This time I would naturally assume, oh my God, is it bleeding? What's is it wrong? Can they see it? Do I need to do a pit stop here and fix my face? And so you see, the ego for its self-worth is always tied to external things. And so if you go with that route in life, you're always going to be attached and having to make sure, you can't go out of the house without checking the mirror, right? You can't go to the bathroom without looking and just, fixing a few things here and there, right? And that's the nature of ego. It tears you down. That's why inner peace only comes through that understanding your value comes from the beloved, from your potential of being able to love so deeply and so freely, and from your ability to potentially serve so freely and so deeply. That's your value. That's what makes you beautiful. It's God's image within you, that Satchitananda, that is always beautiful, unchangingly beautiful. And so we identify with that and we find our strength in that. Right? So Master is still going on about him. Well, now and then he comes to me and he becomes mellowed, but he's a pest. He always argues again. It's very hard to get rid of egoism. You may cut down an ashwatha tree, but the next day a sprout will spring right up again. As long as the roots remain, the tree will grow again. And so those roots are your body, mind, and your identity with them, and getting your sense of value from them. How educated is your mind? How clever is your creativity? How handsome is your body? How strong are your muscles? How thick is your hair? All those things, but ultimately, you're not in full control of most of them. And so you have to cut those roots in order to get rid of that egoism. I said to Hasra, don't speak ill of anyone. It is Narayana himself who has assumed all of these forms. One can worship even a wicked person. Haven't you observed the Kumari Puja? Why should you worship a girl who has all the physical limitations of a human being? It is because she is a form of the Divine Mother. But God dwells in a special way in his devotee. The devotee is his parlor. If the gourd has a large body, then it makes a good tanpura. It gives a nice sound, right? And so if we have cultivated that inner shrine, that parlor room for God, this is, of course, we've talked about not Brother Lawrence, but Saint John of the Cross. Makes that point that ours is to develop the inner, he calls it the bridal chamber, as well as the cave of the heart. So this is the bridal chamber. This is where you will meet with your betrothed, with your beloved, for the union of your spiritual life. And so he says, you don't know when the beloved's coming. You don't know when he's coming. You just know he's going to come. And so you're always keeping that room ready, keeping it in a beautiful form, keeping it pure, keeping it lived in, right? Singing your songs, chanting your mantra, dancing in the name of God there to keep the place fresh and beautiful and ready for when your beloved comes. And then from there, he takes you across that chasm, the chasm that only grace can cross. But God dwells in a special way in his devotee. The devotee is his parlor. If the gourd has a large body, then it makes a good tanpura. It gives a nice sound. Two monks had arrived at the temple garden in the morning. They were devoted to the study of the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedanta, and other scriptures. They entered the master's room, saluted him, and sat on the mat on the floor. Sri Ramakrishna was seated on a small couch. The master spoke to the sadhus in Hindustani. Master, have you had your meal? Sadhu, yes, sir. Master, what did you eat? Sadhu, dal and bread. Will you take some? Master, no, I take only a few morsels of rice. Well, your japa and meditation must be without any desire for results. Isn't that so? The sadhu, yes, sir. Master, that is good. One must surrender the result to God. What do you say? That is the view of the Gita, right? So this sitting with japa and meditation without any desire. We've been talking about that over the last couple of weeks. This notion that our practice is not about achieving or getting or attaining. It's about communion. It's about just being in that inner space, being aware of the presence of God, and touching your Satchitananda, becoming aware of this natural uh, song that's playing within you all the time, but can't be heard because of the noise of ego in the mind. So we try and quiet the mind. We try and activate that love by chanting God's name, right? Because the name of God is love. And so the form of God is your love. And so as you chant God's name, that's what manifests in you. That Satchitananda begins to vibrate, begins to resonate like the body of a guitar, like a body of this drum right here. And so when we work in that inner shrine and we chant our mantra there regularly and deeply with a great sincerity and earnestness, it begins to reverberate with the hum of Satchitananda. And then we become aware of it. And if we do that enough, we get to sit there. And we sit, it's like sitting, it's like sitting in Antarctica in a hot tub, right? It can be cold and the world can be harsh and terribly whatever, oppositional to your life. But if you're in the hot tub of God, no worries. you're you're soaking and enjoying the bliss. And so this is why we practice, so that we can get that. How far do I go with that? So we can keep the water temperature above 100 in the hot tub. All right. That is good. One must surrender the results to God. What do you say? That is the view of the Gita. One sadhu said to the other, quoting from the Gita, O Arjuna, whatever action you perform, whatever you eat, whatever you offer in sacrifice, whatever you give in charity, and whatever austerities you practice, offer everything to me. Right? That's how we get rid of the result idea, is we do everything for the beloved. And in that, we add our love to it and our carefulness, our attention, our meticulous, because we're doing it for our lover at that point. And that's how a lot of stuff changes in us. It's putting ourselves in harmony with our divine nature. So laziness, absent-mindedness, just doing things to get them done, get them out of the way, those are all things that are contrary to being. And those are things that cause us stress in our life. And so those things that attach us to the body, that make us want the body, that make us want to enjoy the body, those things, they always bring with it the bondage, right? In and of themselves, they're not good or bad, but they cause bondage. They cause you to be attached to the body. And if you can just detach from it, no problem. But most of us can't. We stay attached, right? And then when the body feels amorous, we get pulled into ideas and memories and thoughts, and we start putting up our little fences that trap us. So practice off and offer everything to God, right? Always be in the presence and always be letting go, always be offering. Master, if you give God something, you receive it back 1,000 times over, right? That is why, after doing meritorious deeds, one offers a handful of water to God. It is the symbol of offering the fruit to God. When Yudhishthira was about to offer all of his sins to Krishna, Bhima warned him, "Don't do such a thing. Whatever you offer to Krishna will come back 1,000-fold." Right? So he's saying, don't offer your faults to Krishna, right? You can lay them down, just don't offer them. Lay them down and don't think about them. Move your mind away from them, right? Because if you offer them, he's hinting here anyway, in a fun sort of way, that they'll come back 1,000-fold, because that's how God gives. To one of the sadhus, well, sir, one should be desireless. One should renounce all desires. Isn't that so? Sadhu, yes, sir. Master, but I have the desire for bhakti, for devotion. That is not bad. Rather, it's good. Sweets are bad, for they produce acidity. But sugar candy is the exception. Isn't that so? Sadhu, yes, sir. Master, well, sir, what do you think of the Vedanta? Sadhu, it includes all the six systems of philosophy. Master, but the essence of Vedanta is Brahman alone is real, and the world is illusory. I have no separate existence. I am that Brahman alone. Isn't that so? Sadhu, that is true, sir. Master, but for those who lead a householder's life and those who identify themselves with the body, this attitude of I am he is not good. It is not good for householders to read Vedanta or the Yoga Vasishta. It is very harmful for them to read these books. Householders should look on God as their master and on themselves as his servants. They should think, O God, you are the master and the Lord, and I am your servant. People who identify themselves with the body should not have the attitude of I am he. Right? Is everybody clear on that and why that would be? This idea of I am he. See, the problem is you don't know who you are saying when you say I. If you knew you were referring to Satchitananda, if you knew you were referring to that image of God, then you could do that. But most of us, when we say I, we're talking about our ego self. And when you say I am he, I am God, that gives you a sense of license. It gives you a sense of egotism, a sense of bigness, right? Because you're attaching your ego to the qualities of God, and that's not going to be helpful. And so for us, he says we go through the path of negation. Always, oh, I'm not that thought. I'm not the body. I'm not the mind, right? And he says by negating all the things that change, we will back into our divine self, right? We'll back into it without having to know what it is. We just have to keep attaching to anything that changes. And by doing that, at some point, that will silence mind or quiet the mind down. It will thin the ego, the veil, to where you could sort of becomes translucent. And then the truths begin to become self-evident to you, right? But we don't go around associating ourselves with God, saying, I am God, even though it's a true statement. The problem is that you don't know the truth part of it. You've got your I attached to attributes, and then your ideas of what God is are also not clear. If you think of God and as being powerful and majestic and handsome and all those things, okay, but that's not going to necessarily be all that helpful to you. You have to know the nature of God as unconditioned love, right? As infinite wisdom. And so you can identify yourself with those things, right? But it's better not to attach them to you and then wear them like a costume, right? What that does, it turns you into a glad hander, right? Those people at church are real nice to all the people who visit for the first time. Rah, 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 right? But there's not, the sincerity's not there. Because why? Because there's an agenda behind it. It's not pure love. It's not being done for love's sake. It's being done because they want something. They're expecting something. And so that's what Ramakrishna is warning us about here. He's saying don't do things for expectations because you'll become insincere. Don't go around saying I am God because you don't know what that means and you're going to connect these wonderful attributes of God to the wrong device, to your ego self. And you're going to start feeling a sense of license. If you're God, why, then you can do anything you want, right? If you're God, then you can give yourself permission to have no rules whatsoever, right? But if you haven't diminished the ego, that just means the ego is going to use that false freedom to express itself more and more, to get bigger and bigger. So we want to be careful. Is that clearer? Anybody got that?
Yeah, but it's like one big brush stroke of householders all are this way. And you've so often said that there's not a hierarchy,
No, it's not
that
a
one
high,
isn't better than the other.
and that's still true. But there are practices that are appropriate, that are more appropriate to householders because of the conditions of their life. You know,
Mhm.
they don't have the luxury of being in silence all day. You know, they don't have the time to spend those extra hours in meditation and prayer. They don't have the luxury of really being disconnected from most people so that they don't get pulled into narratives. And so because of that, because a householder spends his day in the world, there's a set of practices that are more helpful for enduring that and growing in that type of soil
Oh,
that are like the path of jnana. Ramakrishna is very much not in favor of householders going down that path because he says it's a very high note. It's hard to keep the voice on a high note constantly, unless you're trained in that way.
mhm.
And so you get yourself into a wonderful spiritual mood of renunciation where you are backing into that lap of the mother by denying by your neti neti, I'm not the mind, I'm not that thought, I'm not this body, and you back on in there. But if you're a householder, you're in a world where every single person you meet constantly all day long is treating you like a body and treating you like a mind. And so that tender practice, that very tenuous practice, gets undone rather quickly when you go out into the world. And so he's saying there's more robust tools
Mhm.
for the householder. That's what he's saying. It's not a hierarchical judgment thing. It's just a matter of if you are a baker, you don't need to take a hammer to work.
Thank you. That explains it. Yeah.
All right. So he says, but for those who lead a householder's life and those who identify themselves with the body, this attitude of I am he is not a good one. It is not good for householders to read the Vedanta or the Yoga Vasishta, all right, because it kind of undoes your if you don't read it properly. That's the thing. If you don't read it properly, if you don't use the right words, it will make it sound like there is no God. The God's impersonal and God is not involved in your life and God doesn't have feelings for you because they talk about God, the absolute unchanging. That's the view of the divine. And they take that impersonal approach. And so for someone who's building a relationship with the divine, right, looking for love letters as they take walks and whatnot, then having the scriptures talk about an impersonal God can make you feel like, well, who am I praying to? If I am that, why am I praying? Right? And so you feel less inclined to pray, even though you don't know that God is not that. You think that God is that, and you do think that you are a body. And so it's a matter of honesty. You use this body and mind. You don't fight that idea. You don't fight the idea that your body mind. You just basically turn it into a servant of the beloved. So you start employing the body to sing God's name, to pray, to serve the devotees. So you keep the ego self intact. You just train it up so that it doesn't lead you off a cliff somewhere. And so he's saying that's so if you're a bhakti, study the bhakti scriptures, study the songs and stories and scriptures about telling the stories of these great souls, read the lives of the great saints, and go around serving your beloved in everyone. See them in their eyes. And so that's the path of bhakti. That's the way to go forward and count on God's grace for freeing you. And for the Gyani, it's a little different. They spend a lot of time in seclusion. A lot of thought is given to not being body mind. They're very indrawn, you know, in that sense, and they need a lot of protection, which means they're going to have to be in a monastery or they're going to have to wander off into the hills somewhere in order to maintain that very delicate uh, perception of not being body mind. All right. People who identify themselves with the body should not have the attitude of I am he. The devotees in the room remained silent. Sri Ramakrishna was smiling a little, a picture of self-contentment. He appeared happy in his own self. Greg, they're having dinner, but Greg used to tell the story about a senior Swami that he saw sitting on the couch in the foyer of the monastery in San Francisco. And he just said he walked by him and he was sitting there in such an intense contentment. He was just so present, so obviously needed nothing that it was just striking. And he's told that story several times that I've heard. And so to have here Ramakrishna being presented the same way, he was just absolutely content and content to the point of being a rock. A rock, it's sitting in the middle of the creek and that water is rushing over it and white watering all around it. And that rock is just boom. So what? Let the water rush around me. Let the world go around me. No worries, right? That anchoring. And so that's how we are trying to be inside. We're trying to be anchored to the shrine, anchored to our meditation room in the heart, right? So that we don't get pulled out by all of the reactions of people around us, the news that's happening, the good and the bad news, the events, the good and bad events. We just let all that stuff wash over us, and we stay established in the atmosphere of our shrine, our inner shrine. One of the sadhus whispered in the other's ear, "Look, this is the state of the Paramahamsa."
Maharaj, sorry, can I
Yes.
interrupt? So, what would be the difference between staying in the shrine and staying in the I am, other than a concept?
Uh, well, no, there's no difference, except for that you have to understand that if you're staying in the I am is impersonal, right? There's not a relationship with it. It's you staying remembering that you're not body mind by saying I am the I am, which is the animating energy behind it, or the attention that the senses use to observe. And so you stay in that space. But staying aware of the I am and staying aware of the presence are the exact same practice. But one is viewing God as personal, who is present and is with you, right? Whereas the other is the I am is present, but it is you, right? And so it doesn't have an attribute. And so you're dropping your attributes in order to identify with isness, with being, to accept the moment as perfect, right? And in the other sense, you're active and the purity isn't as important because it's the love and your relationship, your friendship with the beloved that is informing you and guiding you. But you're right. In practice, they're doing the same thing. Both of them are training the ego. Well, in the case of the Gyani, it's thinning the ego, right? Because he's not training it to serve anything, but it's thinning it by his constant remembrance. I am, I am, I am. and there's no attributes being added to that. Whereas the bhakti is God is present. I love him.
Mhm.
We're having a
But
blast.
yeah, but it has to be one's tendency because however much, like in my personal experience that I've tried, like it keeps coming back to the I am, I mean, I adore Sri Ramakrishna, I adore Mother, but it's just comes back to the I am, and it's like sometimes it worries me that when it's Sri Ramakrishna saying no 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 Kiana, and I'm thinking, but this is where I find myself,
No,
you
that's
know.
all right. He doesn't forbid it, and for some people it is a fine path to do. And what I've been trying to do, because I I love the Vedanta, that philosophy, the one without a second, I love the truth of going inside and seeing that I'm separate from the body mind. And so I do that, but I use it to inform my love of God. I use the sense of I am because I am is where the bliss is,
Hmm.
right? And
Right.
s- and so I use it like the Christian scripture as the name of God. Remember the I am, right? And so for me, I'm remembering the I am, which is me, but that's not what
Hmm.
I'm practicing. I'm in the presence of the I am. I'm in the presence of that which, and that's that whole verse in John, which is pivotal. The Word was with God and the Word was God. So it's those two different practices. The bhakti practices Word with God.
But if you say the self is God, like, I mean, if the self is God, meaning all, right? God is all, is everything. So if you
Hmm.
say the self is everything, then you have the same devotion and love towards the self or whatever one calls it, versus having a form. But yeah, I understand it. It's just sometimes I get a little little worried.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's a need to worry.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is true. It does lead to the same goal, and you will behave in the same ways, but for different reasons. It's just that it's the reasoning behind it. With God as other, and God being the I am within you, and you being separate from that. That is a very clear picture of how most of us feel. That
Right.
but the Gyani is going to put those two together, and it's going to come together. But it takes a lot of focus. It takes a lot of silence to feed that. It takes a lot of strength to hold that position inside.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so that's the only thing Thakur is
True,
saying.
true. Mhm.
So I don't begrudge you the love of Vedanta and the wanting to practice that, and I say do that. But I would say don't be afraid of the bhakti. You don't have to make bhakti the major thing, but
No, I do try it. I do try both
yeah,
of them. I do
yeah,
my japa and I do everything else.
yeah, yeah,
It's not that I don't forsake one for the other, but yeah, it's just
yeah.
that my love for it. It's like sometimes it's just I find myself just falling back into it all the time.
Yes, yes, and that's a good thing. And just always remember that actually Thakur is that.
Right.
Thakur is what you will become when you attain that establishment in I'm not the body.
Mhm.
Keep your awareness on the awareness, the I am. Yeah, it will take you to the same place. And if that's where Mother is taking you inwardly, go boldly. Go boldly.
But
And
I take her with me.
yeah,
I take
exactly.
mother with me. So
Exactly. Mother, point out that I am to me again.
exactly.
Right? Keep
Thank
keep
you.
keep my mind there. Yeah, absolutely. No, take all these tools. Just if you find one undoing the other, then sit with it for a while and figure out, go through and use the different words. Take the bhakti teaching and use Gyanik phrases to do it. Take the Gyanik teaching and use bhakti phrases to do it. To kind of
Right,
understand that this is the same practice.
right.
It's just it's or the same point to the practice, but just a different tuning for where we are inside, you know.
Right. Thank you, Maharaj.
Certainly, you know. So one of the sadhus whispered in the other's ear, "Look, this is the state of the Paramahamsa. This is the state of that realization. Look at this man. Look at that contentment. Look at that joy. Look at the bliss of being on his face right now." The master to M, "I feel like laughing." Sri Ramakrishna smiled like a child, right? just It's just like, oh my goodness gracious, I wish I could have taken a picture. Sitting across the aisle from me on my way here from Denver was this newborn, probably a year old, long enough he could hold his head in place, but that was about it. But this child, I have never seen a more blissful baby. He was so happy the whole trip, and was just kind of he was looking at me, and I, of course, I'm just I lose myself utterly in the presence of children, and I was making my faces and being nice to him, and he was just looking at me like a cat, like, what's wrong with you? Right? No connection at all. But then toward the end of the flight, his mother was trying to pack up, and she reached forward and her cell phone fell on the floor, and the baby saw it. And I reached down and picked up the cell phone and I handed it to his mother. And that somehow got through to him that I was not other, that I was not separate. And when I handed the phone, the baby looked at me with this most beautiful, open, I love you smile, like I was now included, in that. And so I read this thing here that Ramakrishna smiled like a child. And I just see that look on that baby's face, which was just pure, pure innocence. There was no hint of the mark of the world in there, just wide open all the way through. And this is exactly how Thakur smiled, just like a child, where you'd look at him and you would see no sign of a hardened adult, no sign of a world-weary soul, right? Someone fresh who's living in the presence, never older than the moment, right? So Ramakrishna smiled like a child. The monks left the room, and the devotees were moving about in the room and on the porch. Master to M, "Did you go to Nabin Sen's house?" M, "Yes, sir. I listened to the songs from downstairs." Master, "That was well done. Your wife was there. She is a cousin of Keshav Sen, isn't she?" "A distant cousin." Sri Ramakrishna strolled up and down with M. No one else was with them. The master, "A man visits his father-in-law's house. I too often used to think that I should marry, go to my father-in-law's house and have great fun. But see what has come of it. I live at a temple. My wife lives across the road here. There's no going to my father-in-law's house for a good time." Sir, you say if the boy holds his father's hand, he may slip, but if he doesn't, if the father holds his hand, that is exactly your condition. The mother has taken hold of your hand, right? And that's a statement of absolute surrender. It's like if I'm holding on to my dad's hand, I can let go, right? And I can slip into my little bouts of mischief, and dad will come and grab me when it gets too far. But when you're in that absolute state of surrender, when mother takes your hand, takes your choice away, right? Says, "Get over here," right? And holds your hand and won't let you break free. That's the other relationship, right? That's the other relationship. So, if you behave yourself, you get to hold God's hand. If you're a rascal, mother's going to take your hand and drag you down the aisle. All right. The mother has taken hold of your hand. Master, I met Bamandas and the Vishwasa's house, at the Vishwashi's house. I said to him, I have come to see you. As I was leaving the place, I heard him say, Goodness gracious, the Divine Mother has caught hold of him like a tiger seizing a man. At that time, I was a young man, very stout, and always in ecstasy. Right. All right. Where are we at? We're at 5:27. We're going to stop here because there's going to be some things here we're going to want to take very gently and very softly next week. I don't want, I don't want to jump into it this week. All right, so let me turn off the recorder.